All right, everyone, and welcome to the Reflections category contest results. Without further ado, and much to the disappointment of all of you who want further ado, let's jump right in. This first entry was from Chris May, and it's a photo of a pianist or keyboarder playing his instrument, and you can tell that because of the reflection in his sunglasses. Felt like this was a really good use of the reflection prompt because it's not the entire photo. It adds something beyond the photo, it pulls it into the image, and it's also a really good structure for an image. It's a very close-up portrait. You know exactly what the subject is doing, what he's focused on, even though we can't see it directly. So there's a whole lot of dimension in this photo, and it is really a very, very good image. This next entry comes from Danny Flewelling, and this is a use of reflection in street photography. Now what we've got here is we have 3 different layers to this image. So the way that I think that this image is structured is that it's a photo of a reflection on glass. Now what's on the right side of the frame is what's through what's probably, I'm guessing that this photo was taken at a corner of a building where both of the corners are glass. And so what's on the right side of the frame is looking through those windows. The blurry person on the left side of the frame is reflecting off the window that's closest. And then if you look on the bottom of the frame, that triangle that the person appears to be walking on is what's actually inside of these 2 glass windows. So there's a ton of different depth, angle, and perspective being placed into this one image. And also, I really think, by the way, the structure of having the reflection of the person appearing to walk on the building there, really, really good instinct. So it makes the image exceedingly captivating, and just the whole overall structure is really, really enjoyable to look at. This next photo is from Dave Carrera, and is a photo of a houseboat. Now, the houseboats are much more of a thing in the UK than they are here in the US. And there's much more of a houseboating culture that is very interesting. But anyway, about one thing I really thought was interesting about this photo is that some of you did, at least 2 of you did. The reflection image is inversed. And that's always something I'm kind of mixed on, because it's like, okay, now what's happened is the top of the image, which is what we would see as being normal, the normal top, what we would perceive as normal is now upside down, and so it makes the sky and the subject look a little bit rippled. Honestly, while I'm always a little bit torn on it, I do think it is a completely valid and interesting way to structure a subject, because then it makes it look like you have more of the world being reflected in the bottom portion of the image. So the only couple of nitpicky little things that I would point out about this one: personal preference. Really hate trash cans in photos. It's just something I'm weird about. Apologize, but the trash can in the bottom right, on the right side of it, really just jumps off the image at me. And then the boat being just a little bit, the front tire of it being just a little bit off the side of the frame. Those were really the only 2 things that I looked at and thought, would have done those a little bit differently. I like the overall structure. I really, really like the way that the use of color and texture work. And one of the things that I would point out is that if this image were converted to black and white, it would still work. And that's not something that can be said of every color photo. So very good work in that regard as well. This photo comes to us from Diego Leon, and is a reflection of buildings in the still water of what looks like a community fountain. And man, there's a fountain very much like that in San Francisco, but I don't think that this is that fountain. The trees don't look right for what's around that park. Anyway, it's been 8 years, it's been a day since I was there, so I'm going off memory. So at any rate, really liked the way that the water was used as a mirror here to show what's beyond this park in the city. So I thought that that was really good. The technical execution here is exceptionally good. Everything that should be in focus is in focus. The colors with the way that the blues and the brown reds and the yellows all work together. Those are three really complementary colors when used as a triad. Just happen to really work well in this scene. The only things I would do a little bit differently, again, like I was just mentioning, harping on about trash cans, bird poop in photos, not something I'm a huge fan of. Kind of hard to get rid of it, I'll admit, when there's tons of pigeons around. But I found the bottom left portion of the waterfall a bit distracting for that reason. It kept taking my eyes away from what I should be focusing on, which is the reflection and the way that the pigeons are above the reflection there. This next photo comes from Tim Peters, and it's a reflection of the light, I think. I had a little bit of trouble with a handful of entrants getting some of their photos into the right category. So if I do this again at the end of 2022, I'm going to figure out a better way to do that. At any rate, this was the one I'm pretty sure was submitted for the reflection portion of this. And you can kind of make out a reflection of something in the background in the glass that's in between the photographer and the snacks. This next photo is from Kevin Rios, and it's a photo of a duck. I gotta imagine that's ice, but it, like the other duck, what the heck? Jesus duck here is walking on water. It's not ice. It can't be. So it's got ripples, and there's another duck sitting in it. So at any rate, I don't know if maybe it was just landing or what. That is such a fluky capture. Good use of reflection in terms of, like, I'm now fixated on why this duck is standing on top of water. Like, that's actually going to bother me for a little while. At any rate, I also like that the reflection of the sky is captured in the water, and you can see a little bit more detail about what's beyond this pond because of that. Only things I would suggest differently are that your histogram is a little bit truncated, meaning that you don't have a whole lot of contrast here. You have some light grays down to some medium-ish dark grays. And so a little bit more contrast in this image would, I think, have added to some of the visual interest and would also have served as a cue to the viewer to help keep their eyes in the part of the frame where you want it to. So what I mean by that is if you see the top of the frame where you've got that little downward arch of slightly darker background beyond the pond, if that were a little bit darker, then it would create that boundary of the pond, would also then become a boundary for the visual part of the image. And the same thing can be said of the clouds that are reflecting in the hills that are reflecting in the pond, by the way. So the good news about a missed opportunity like that is you can always go back and redo it in your digital file and just play around with it and see how it looks and if it's something that works well for your tastes. So Noe Landaverde sent in this photo of the tuba, or the sousaphone rather, and I thought this was a really interesting use of reflection, again, because one of the things we've seen in many of the photos here is that the reflection sort of dominates the entire image, right? But not some of these. Like this one, it's just a very small element of the image that you can see. Here's all of this other stuff that's going on, right? There's a sousaphone, and whether it's just propped up and resting or whether it's part of a concert that's going on, it's on the other side of this wall. And then there's something beyond the wall. And if you just had the wall and the roof, it wouldn't be all that interesting of a photo, but now you add the sousaphone and you can see the warping of the space that's around the rest of the frame that doesn't make it into the image. And that becomes a pretty interesting use of space because it's not just the real space, it's the bent and the warped space that's reflecting in the curves of the sousaphone. So it's a good use of shape and reflection to show a whole lot more about what's going on in the setting. This photo is from Richard Mander and shows a photo of, I would assume his or maybe a Siamese cat in front of a mantelpiece mirror. So one of the things I think that's really working here is, if you remember, was it Lady and the Tramp? I think it is the old Disney movie with the Siamese cat twins who sing in unison and move like in opposition. This sort of has that same sense because the cat is standing so close to the reflection that you get the shape of the cat in opposition, right? So there's effectively becomes two cats, one looking to the right, one looking to the left. Both of them with their tails now touching each other and curving in the same exact way. So I think this is the only entry where the subject was touching the reflection, other than like a scene entry, but and in that way causing the subject to double. And I thought that was a really clever use of a reflection in scene. And so the last one before we get into honorable mentions comes from Samuel West, and really captivating street photo with reflections and good lighting and good contrast and a nice use of a little bit of motion blur, a whole lot of really good elements working together to create this image. We get the reflection of the water in the street, and it looks like we're getting some reflection somehow in whatever the photo is being taken through, where it looks like the bus is being broken up. I'm not sure if that's what exactly that is, but it makes the bus look like it's two things coming together. So anyway, I thought this was an image I spent a good deal of time looking at. I thought it was a really fascinating and well done image. One clearly that was shot on the fly, but that was a good result and a good example of looking at a scene and knowing this is the moment that I take the photo, and I'm going to do it right now. For our honorable mentions, this first one comes from Frank Wouters or Wouters. Wouters, I think it is. Anyway, Frank sent in this scene of a pond with a forest in the background and a bunch of I'm going to guess that this is, I've seen photos of Asian ceremonies, ceremonies in Asia, where they'll take like paper bags and put candles in them and put them in little boats and send them out into the water. I gotta guess that's what this is, but there's not enough information in the scene to confirm that. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter if that's what it is. It's a really interesting photo, because at first I looked at this and I'm like, wow, that is a really sort of ominous setting. And then the more I looked at it, the more I thought, actually, that's a pretty festive setting. And you've got a really nice reflection, all of which is coming from the lighting in the scene, as well as you've got the actual trees on the shore being very well lit up, and then the slightly dimmer reflection, slightly softer in the foreground. And it's a very, very good use of the way that a reflection in an image can create a mirror. Wherever that horizon line is, can create a mirror that reflects very evenly. And just, this was one of those photos I just kept looking at and thinking, yeah, I kind of wish I'd been there to take this photo. This photo comes from Aravindan and is a photo, looks like it's a person walking home through flooded streets, carrying some groceries or something, or some supplies of some sort. And I really liked that the flooded streets, you can see in this rippled moving water, the reflection of the buildings that are going upward from the side of the streets. Because just looking at this, it looks like it's just sort of like a bunch of low-rise buildings, but no, actually that reflection tells us it's a high-rise. So it gives a whole lot of context to this scene, because you don't get high-rises in rural areas. So this is some flooding that's happened in a place where there's a lot of people. So I don't know if this is part of monsoon season or if it's a regular event or something uncommon, but this is a really good way to use reflection to show more than what's in the scene, which is something we've seen multiple times done very well throughout this category. The image composition is stunning. In the very center, we have this person walking home, and they are basically a silhouette. And they separate the image into two parts that are really part of the same scene. One of the things I find really interesting is that the balance of the image, as there's more When I mean balance, if you take an image and you divide it into any arbitrary number of sections, be it 2 or infinity, doesn't matter. If you have a balanced image, then each section that you break it into has relatively the same amount of importance to the overall image. So that's a great technique. An unbalanced image is a great technique. It's not to say that one is right or wrong. The left side of the image is a little bit more unbalanced because you've got a better view of the high rise, and you've got this other person up in front, which gives a larger context to the image that the subject is not the only person going through this. There are others. And so the whole structure of the image and the use of reflections does a lot to show more about the image than just a person carrying supplies home in the water. So for the runner-up, we have a reflection using a mirror and some things that are available. And this comes from Rod Stewart. And as Rod explained to me, this was a photo of his folks. And what I liked about this photo is that more than any of the other photos, this one was planned. In fact, I think this is probably the only photo that I looked at the entire category and I thought, this is the result of someone sitting down and saying, how can I use a reflection to tell a story that I want to tell or say a thing that I want to say? Every other photo, I would imagine, is being in the right place at the right time to take a picture with that reflection. And so that made this image unique in all of the entrants for this category. And it's a good use of reflection because it shows what's going on, a little bit of the rest of this room. The photo of his folks is lined up very well with the edge of the frame of the mirror. And then the cards that are stuck to the mirror say something, however, whatever it is you want to interpret it about the people in the photo, right? We know that because they're arranged in the same orientation, king on the right, queen on the left, husband on the right, wife on the left, as the photo. So I really liked how much thought went into this in terms of both the message that Rod wanted to convey and the structure of the image as well. So good work on that. In this last one, the winner of the category comes from Garrett Dennington. And this is a photo that I looked at and I was kind of torn on. And the more I looked at it, the more I appreciated it. And the more it kind of frustrated me in some ways. Okay, so let's take a look at what all's going on here. This is a photo of two buildings reflected in water and inverted. Okay, so the first time I looked at this, I just thought, oh, it's a photo of a reflection of buildings in snow. And when I looked at it in more detail, I could see, hey, that's not snow, that's stuff in water. And that's not clouds, that's cracks in the asphalt in the water. Okay, so really good sharp detail and really good work, really good use of the reflection prompt. I liked a lot that not only was it inverted, but it's also structured so that the text in the signs on the reflection is readable. So I think that's inverted and mirrored. And I also really liked the tonal range in this, the way that shadows and midtones and highlights work together. And I really liked that in the real buildings, the verticals are corrected. And I did notice that they are not in the reflections. That said, with the texture that's in the water, that would be a nigh impossible task to do and have it look real. But I really did like the way that the buildings, that the real buildings look. And I think that in terms of the practice of an architectural photo, that if you inverted this, it would be spot on with a whole lot of what's really going on well with good architectural photos. Especially if you cropped out the reflection, then it would just be a pretty good and serviceable architectural photo. So the reason that I like this the most and that it's taking the category prize is because it's a very good use of tone and texture, which is what black and white photos should do. It's a really good use of reflection because it's not just the reflection itself, it's also the texture of the water that is being used as the mirror in the scene and the way that texture adds something to the images that are to the buildings that are in the reflection. So some good use both of in-camera capture, technical exposure accuracy, and post-production work to correct the verticals. So all of that is very well done. Good job, Garrett.